Hello and welcome to my masterclass on Love, Relax, and Retire Your Inner Critic. So in this masterclass, I will teach you how does our inner critic negatively affect our life and our inner child. How is your inner critic formed? What are the limitations and intentions and motivations of this part? What is the role of inner critic in our life? How, where, and when does the inner critic show up in our life situations? And then we will discuss solutions, strategies, practical advice on how to love, relax, and retire your inner critic. So I welcome you to take a lot of notes and revisit this masterclass as many times as you need. This is a life skill that you will need in order to prevent self-sabotage, in order to invite growth in your life. We need to keep our inner critic on our side, really understand them, love them, relax them, and retire them. So what are the effects of having a mean, strong inner critic? So let's begin with that, and then we will delve into how is our inner critic formed. So number one, low self-esteem. If you have a mean inner critic, you will have low self-esteem, self-doubt, constant self-sabotage, that negative voice just nagging in your head, asking you to be perfect, giving you anxiety and depression, insomnia, sleepless nights. You will have that anxiety and insecurity because your inner critic does not let you relax. They expect and demand. And why do they do that? We will get into it. Inner critic is also the reason we're so mean to ourselves. Inner critic is the reason we procrastinate, we sabotage our relationships, we sabotage our career success, and then we feel like a failure. All that negative voice, all that negative self-talk is our inner critic talking. So let's get into it. How is inner critic formed? Now, when in childhood we are treated with neglect, rejection, abandonment, abuse, this shocks and scares our true self. Our inner child goes into hiding within our unconscious. And then a survivor part emerges to manage us and control us. And this part manages our feelings, our impulses, our behaviors. Really, inner critic keeps a hold on us. And the motivation and intention of our inner critic is to save us from the pain of abandonment, rejection, criticism. They want us, inner critic wants us to get approval, get accepted, to belong, to seem like you're good enough in society, to stay safe and survive. They're not quite worried about you thriving or growing. They think, our inner critic thinks, that you are still that helpless child that needs help, that needs protection. And inner critic steps up so your inner child never has to feel the same rejection, abandonment, criticism that they initially received, because of which the inner critic was born. A strong inner critic usually has a dominating adult sounding voice and a persona. A strong inner critic tends to take over our inner world and fills it with shame, guilt, fear, criticism, demands and forces us by insulting us, threatens. We threaten ourselves, we punish ourselves, second guess, scrutinize, undermining, minimize ourselves. We dismiss our needs, we dismiss what we want. Then we railroad our own voice, we suppress our own voice, micromanages us, right? So does not let us catch a breath. So all these traits that you think you're doing to yourself, that you're so mean to you, that you're not able to let yourself become successful or not able to go after what you want, it's your inner critic, that one part of you that you have blended in with, and you have become your own worst enemy in many ways. So inner critic sub our, what happens is that our inner world, all our other parts of our inner family, such as inner child, inner teen, inner parent, they all submit to this part that is so dominating and so insulting. And then we start operating as our false self. So once we blend in and give in to the demands of the inner critic runs the show, and a false self, our true self, goes into hiding, and a false self emerges and does all the belittling and commenting and sabotaging ourselves. And inner critic is formed during shame and abandonment that your inner child felt when they were small. When you were a young child, you felt shame and abandonment, and to protect you from that shame and abandonment in adult life, the inner critic continues. So whenever now in adult situation you encounter somebody or someone or a situation that reminds you of your past, this activates your inner critic because they think that same unsafety is coming your way and you will not be able to handle it. So your inner critic has no trust or faith in your abilities. They just want to manage you. So whenever you're traumatized, a wounded part goes into hiding and a survivor part comes out to manage the scenario. And we all have different wounds in different areas of work, relationships, self-love, self-confidence, and inner critic controls and manages all of those. And the motivation of our inner critic is to protect you from shame or abandonment. And they do this by telling you, you're lazy, you need to be studying harder or working harder, get it together. And why are they doing this? Because they want you to succeed. Inner critic acts out of their own fear of what might happen if we show up as ourselves, if we don't follow the rules of the dysfunctional family or the dysfunctional workplace. We might get rejected, shamed, shunned by others. Then how will we survive? That's how our inner critic thinks. Inner critic stops us from connecting or asking questions or taking healthy risks or reaching out to people or depending on people or expecting happiness, feeling worthy, or having a positive self image. All this, our inner critic stops us from feeling because they want to protect us from danger. And chronic trauma has frozen our inner critic into their role. Our inner critic, get this, our inner critic does not even know that now we're not that helpless, powerless child with no options who's dependent on their caregivers for survival. Our inner critic is still frozen in time, thinking that we are still that powerless, helpless child. So, how do you know that your inner critic is showing up? How do you know that it's inner critic in charge and calling the shots, and I've blended in, and no longer is my wise, loving inner parent in charge? So, inner critic can show up as internal pressure, memories, dialogues, commands. They can give you internal feeling of compulsion. You need to go act on this. Or commands, inner commands, physical sensations of feeling shame, guilt, and internal attack. You will have an internal attack of self-doubt, judgment, limiting belief. That cruel inner voice that you hear is the inner critic. And all the patterns that, and then when inner critic affects us and dominates us, we get into trauma responses, right? Because we are inner critic puts fear in us, so we procrastinate because we're too scared. Inner critic puts fear in us, so we people please because we're too scared to speak our own truth. Perfectionism, inner critic puts fear in us that if you're not perfect, you will get rejected. So perfectionism, procrastination, people pleasing, all these ways, they're not you. They're not your true, authentic self. They are your inner critic taking over and controlling you, manipulating you. Then, when we think in black and white, all or nothing, thinking in extreme, this always happens to me, or nothing ever works for me. That drama is inner critic. Avoiding healthy risks and taking chances and doing the thing that you want to do, is is your healthy self. But worrying or catastrophizing, saying, oh my god, if you do this, something this will happen, or projecting the worst into the future, ruminating, overthinking, obsessive thinking, all of that is our inner critic. Comparing ourselves to others, inner critic compares ourselves to others to make sure that we're not getting ahead of them. Because what happens if you try to get ahead of others? Maybe in the past you were told to sit down, or people hated on you for being successful. So now your inner critic will make sure that you're not able to be successful, so that you're not hurt or you're not dismissed by others. Our inner critic wants us to be accepted and validated, and they run on fear of rejection and abandonment. All those thoughts that you get of minimizing yourself, invalidating yourself, doubting yourself, saying you're not good enough, all of that is not you, it's your inner critic. When you question your reality, when you're not sure what's happening, gossiping, the should statements, oh, you should be doing this, oh, you should do this, oh, you should lose weight, you should do this career, you should talk, all of that is your inner critic trying to control, manage, manipulate you. Right? And then finger pointing, you're not good enough, you didn't do this right, I wish you did this. All of that is also our inner critic telling us that we are bad. Certain times when we're so rigid that I don't want to do this, that is also our inner critic telling us to be rigid, don't be flexible, don't be understanding of others, because they're trying to create separateness from others. Our inner critic wants to keep us safe by separating us from others, by telling, oh, they're not good enough or you're not good enough, so we don't try to be one with others. We don't take risk and be vulnerable, right? They will put a mental filter in us based on the past trauma, so we don't change and grow, and we jump to conclusions. That's all inner critic. Taking things personally. How many of us do that? A lot of us do that. So that's also our inner critic, when we take things personally, when we refuse to see other person's point of view, when we're not able to be compassionate towards self and others. That is not your true self. That is your inner critic. When we're constantly living in painful limiting beliefs like, I could never have a great career, I could never have that much money, all of that is your inner critic. Clinging on to that past, that's your inner critic trying to not let you grow because they are scared of change. Inner critic is the part of us that is very scared of change. Our inner critic thinks, well, if I criticize you, then you're going to be careful and others are going to want you around. If I judge you, then it won't hurt as much as when others judge you. That is how our inner critic thinks. If I judge you as selfish, then you'll focus more on people pleasing and others will want you because you will be needed. That's how our inner critic thinks. So it's not you judging others, criticizing self and others. It's your inner critic, that one part of you that is creating this separation between you and others. So you're not able to connect with them and get their love, support, and have that interconnectedness. Inner critic will always keep you in isolation, right? So if I judge others, then you will just stay away from them. You will behave like right? You will continue behaving what you learned from your family of origin, and that's their other goal. To inner critic wants you to continue behaving as you did when you were a child. They tell you, hey, inner critic says, if I have you seeking approval, then you will not get hurt. Your inner critic keeps you small, hidden, and invisible. Your inner critic is the reason you act like that overly nice person. And you act like that nice person so nobody So you can stay hidden. Nobody sees your power or your intelligence or your charm. No one is threatened by you. So you're not exposed to any hate, jealousy, ridicule, right? So if you're small and hidden, no one's going to challenge you. No one's going to even so that's what our inner critic thinks, that I will save you from jealousy, ridicule, abandonment, rejection, criticism if you stay small. And inner critic makes sure that they will keep us small. Our inner critic is the reason we feel that toxic guilt. Inner critic thinks that if I make you feel guilty, you will be very careful and hyper vigilant, and you will not make any mistakes. If I compare you to others, then you will try harder, do more, do better, right? If I point someone else's strengths, then you will work harder, right? So these are many ways if we leave our inner critic unchecked, these are many ways our inner critic can basically ruin our life, can leave us in that rumination pattern of self-sabotage, right? So how do you love, relax, and retire your inner critic? So, number one, detect your inner critic. Find out how, become that non judgmental witness and observer of your thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors, and see where does my inner critic come up. Familiarize yourself with and understand your inner critic by witnessing them, and see how your inner critic shows up. When do they show up? What is their intention for showing up? And most importantly, what needs are they trying to meet? Is your inner critic really worried about you and wants to get you the approval and validation and wants you to get belong? Is that what they're trying to show to ask, do for you? You can, what are they asking you to do? What are they asking you to gossip? Are they asking you to judge others, compare yourself, belittle yourself? Are they putting you down? So understand, how does your inner critic show up in all these different ways? And then understand, how can you relax your inner critic? Then we work on, once you see how, when, where they show up, then we work on relaxing them. We talk to them. We show them that, hey, I'm not that little child anymore. I've grown up. I am not powerless. I'm not helpless. I have autonomy and discernment and boundaries, and I'm a grown up. I can take care of myself. So please stop the pain of judging me and putting me down, right? So we really need to have a connection with our inner critic. Once we get to know them, we start to connect with them, understand them, and show them the pain that they're causing now, right? Discuss with them gentler ways of handling the same thing. Hey, if I make a mistake, don't come at me like that. Talk to your inner critic. It is your own part. And they, once we reach out to inner critic, they start to soften, they start to understand you, they start to kind of be more on standby. You can ask them to be on standby for you. And guys, this obviously, this work is practice, and it takes many different ways of approaching your inner critic as well. Show them that you are capable of handling life as an adult. So, and then this one technique that I use a lot with my clients is nip it in the bud. N is notice when critical inner critic or critical parent arrives on the scene. Take a deep breath as you notice them, and then identify the nature of attack. Are they judging you? Are they blaming you? Are they criticizing you? Are they yelling at you? Are they trying to control you, calling you names? Or are they doing this to other people? Are they judging, criticizing, blaming others? So label that behavior, call it out. How do you deal with a bully? You call it out. So you witness it, observe it, label it, call it out. And then comes NIP. Once you've noticed it, I is to identify it, label it, And then P is to parent yourself by replacing the distorted messages with loving messages, kind messages from your loving parent, wise, loving inner parent. You detach, you explain all this to your critical parent, then you detach from them. And then you set internal boundaries with your inner critic. You tell them, hey, it's not okay to call me names anymore. It's not okay to insult or belittle me. We are one. You are a part of me. So when you talk to me like this, when my inner voice sounds to me so mean, so belittling, it's very discouraging to my inner child. And I cannot make any progress in life if you keep belittling me. So set a boundary. Set a internal boundary. We all talk about external boundaries, but set an internal boundary with your inner critic so they can understand that what they're doing is hurting you. And then understand what need are they trying to help you fulfill. Are they asking you to stay small in a social setting because they think you will not be able to handle it, or are they asking you to not go for a certain career because they think so? Ask them, what are you scared of? What are you trying to prevent? What are you keeping me safe from? And then you can, and once you understand the need and you talk to them, you can write a letter to your inner critic, and that has a huge impact on how soft you get. You can tell them, hey, I want to live a wise, gentle life. I am ready. I am ready. I am living a wise, soft, gentle life. I do not want, I am not going to be mean to myself anymore. We want to change this inner dialogue, and because it serves no purpose. So talk to them, write a letter to them, and then you can role play this. A very, very effective technique is to role play. Practice saying those boundaries in a loving, understanding, kind manner towards your inner critic. So your inner critic is your partner, like whoever you're practicing with, or me if I'm your coach. And then I will say, you're just not good enough. You didn't do that right. Look at other girls, they did it so much better. And then what are you going to say to your inner critic when your inner critic puts you down and compares you and says you didn't do it quite right? You will say, hey, I did it to the best of my abilities. I'm happy with my performance. Or you could say, I'm not quite happy. Even that is your inner critic saying, I'm not quite happy. But speak your truth to your inner critic, telling them that you do not need to be perfect. You do not need to win over others, that you're doing your best and your best keeps on getting better, and that's what growth is. Explain this to your inner critic and share the impact that their disrespectful voice is causing to the harm that they're causing to your inner child. Once you understand what your inner critic is trying to accomplish by judging, doubting, questioning, undermining you, then you can really understand them better and help them relax. It is your job as your own wise, loving, kind parent to lead your parts, lead your inner critic to softness by understanding what are they trying to do. And then develop strategies to address those needs of lovability or belonging. Show your inner critic, I'm loved, I'm lovable, I belong, I'm okay. Even if I get rejected, I can survive, I can thrive, that I'm not that little child anymore. So this way you gain the trust of your inner child, you gain the trust of your inner critic, and you strengthen your wise, loving inner parent. Right? So as you keep doing this practice of really questioning and challenging and engaging with your inner critic and helping them relax and retire and soften, your life will become much easier. You will stop standing in your own way. You will stop being so scared, and you will stop living out out of fear. A lot of our dreams don't come true because our inner critic has us living and reacting out of a place of fear and shame. So once you relax your inner critic, your shame will go away, your fear will go away, and you will be able to stand in your power and make decisions from a healthy place. And that is my prayer for you, that you make your decisions not blended in with the inner critic, but from your own power and your own autonomy. From may all your decisions come from your kind, loving, wise inner parent. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I will be sending you journal prompts with it. So I'm excited for you to get into the work and keep practicing this work. The more you practice, this is lifelong work. The more you practice, the easier it gets, and happier and blissful your life becomes. Good luck.